Have you ever felt your body reacting in strange ways, as if it was trying to tell you something? Imagine waking up one day and realizing everything has changed. Your energy, your senses, even the way you see the world. Sounds crazy, right? But what if I told you that this could be a clear sign of a spiritual awakening? Think about the last time you felt a sudden and inexplicable change in your body. Did you really understand what was happening? Now imagine discovering that these transformations are more common than you think and could be the beginning of something incredible. Have you ever wondered why some days feel so different from others, as if a greater force was guiding you? What if these changes were actually an invitation to a new spiritual journey? Hold on to that thought and reflect, what is your body trying to show you? Let's explore together these 3 unexpected changes that might be happening to you right now. Are you ready to find out? If you enjoy this enlightening exploration, consider showing your support by clicking the Super Thanks button below. By supporting this channel, you become part of a community that values truth, self-discovery, and spiritual enlightenment. Dude, let me tell you something that happened to me, and I don't even know where to start. It was crazy. It started with physical symptoms and discomforts that I had never felt before. Like, suddenly, I started feeling tingling and energetic sensations throughout my body. I swear it felt like there was an electric current running through my extremities and up my spine. Initially, I thought it was some circulation problem or something, but then I realized it was something much deeper. It was like my body was trying to adjust to a new frequency or something like that, and it wasn't just that. Sometimes I felt a vibration in my hands and feet, especially when I was meditating or in a deep moment of silence. It was strange, but at the same time, fascinating. Another thing that caught me by surprise was the changes in my sleep. I always slept like a rock, but suddenly I started having insomnia. Whole nights staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. And when I finally did, I had vivid and disturbing dreams that left me more tired than before. There was one time I dreamt I was flying over an unknown city, and when I woke up, it felt like I had actually done it. And it wasn't just insomnia. Sometimes I felt extremely tired out of nowhere, as if I had run a marathon, and other times I had energy to spare. It was like being on an emotional and physical roller coaster. And dude, don't even get me started on the physical detox. My body started eliminating toxins in a way I had never seen before. I had headaches that felt like my skull was splitting, nausea that sent me running to the bathroom, and even skin eruptions that made me look like a teenager again. My digestion also changed completely. Things I used to eat without any problem started to make me sick. It was like my body was cleansing itself of everything that no longer served. And although it was uncomfortable, deep down I knew it was necessary. It was like my body was preparing for something bigger, aligning with a new phase of my life. Heightened sensitivity was another thing that took me by surprise. Suddenly, I started noticing I was more sensitive to sounds, lights, and smells. A noise I barely noticed before now sounded like thunder. Lights seemed brighter, almost blinding, and smells that were once pleasant became almost unbearable. I remember one time getting on a bus and the smell of people's perfume made me dizzy. It was surreal. And it wasn't just that. My emotional sensitivity was also through the roof. I, who had always been a more controlled person, started crying easily, sometimes for no apparent reason. It was like all my emotions were on the surface, ready to explode at any moment. And speaking of emotions, man, what a roller coaster. I could go from laughing to crying in a matter of minutes. I felt deep and inexplicable emotions, like I was connected to something much bigger than myself. There were moments of intense joy that felt like my heart would burst, and others where sadness swallowed me like a black hole. It was hard to control, but at the same time, it was an incredible journey of self-discovery. I started understanding more about myself and what really mattered in my life. It was an intense emotional journey, but extremely revealing. And of course, with all these changes came changes in my eating habits. Suddenly, things I loved to eat started to make me sick. I had to cut out a lot of things from my diet, like processed foods and red meats. My body just couldn't tolerate them anymore. On the other hand, I started craving healthier, more natural foods. It was like my body was guiding me to a cleaner, more balanced diet. And it wasn't easy because I've always been a junk food lover, but gradually I adapted and saw the benefits of these changes. Speaking of noticeable physical changes, one of the craziest things was my weight fluctuation. Without changing anything in my diet or physical activity levels, I started losing and gaining weight unexpectedly. There was a time when I lost about 5 kilos without doing anything different, and then, out of nowhere, I gained it all back. It was a very disconcerting process because I couldn't understand what was happening to my body. But over time, I realized it was part of the alignment and transformation process I was going through. If you enjoy this enlightening exploration, consider showing your support by clicking the Super Thanks button below. By supporting this channel, you become part of a community that values truth, self-discovery, and spiritual enlightenment. Another thing I noticed were changes in my skin and hair. My skin, which had always been normal, started having breakouts and dryness, but also moments where it seemed to glow unusually. It was like my body was going through a deep detox, and my hair, which had always been healthy, started falling out at times. But then it grew back stronger. It was a very strange process, but at the same time, I began to realize that these physical changes were reflections of the internal transformations I was experiencing. It was like my body was adjusting to a new reality. Finally, one of the most interesting changes was in my posture and flexibility. I had never been a big fan of physical exercise, but during this period, I started practicing yoga and meditation. And man, what a difference that made! My posture improved significantly, and my flexibility increased in ways I never thought possible. It was like my body was aligning with this new spiritual phase I was living, and this not only improved my physical health, but also my mental and emotional well-being. It was a complete transformation, and although it was a challenging process, it was incredibly rewarding. So these were some of the unexpected changes that happened to me during my spiritual awakening. It was a journey full of ups and downs, but it brought me many lessons and deep self-knowledge. If you're going through something similar, know that you're not alone and that this is all part of the process of personal transformation and growth. And speaking of which, the heightened sensitivity also made me realize I was more connected to my environment. It was like I could feel the energy of people and places. There was a time I entered a room and felt a wave of sadness so strong I almost had to run out. Later, I found out that place had been the scene of a heavy argument among friends. It was like I was picking up on the vibrations of the environment in a way I had never experienced before. And this was a challenge because suddenly I had to be more attentive to the places I frequented and the people I interacted with. It was no longer just about being physically present, but also about being energetically in tune. And this sensitivity extended to my relationships. I started noticing that some friendships and relationships I maintained were not doing me any good. It was like I was seeing everything with a clarity I hadn't had before. Toxic people, or those who didn't positively contribute to my life, began to drift away, and it was painful but necessary. In contrast, new people began to appear, people who were in tune with this new phase of my life. And these new relationships brought a sense of lightness and harmony I had never experienced before. And man, speaking of changes, the sensitivity to food was one of the most surprising things. I've always been someone who loved to eat everything, but suddenly I started developing food intolerances. Things I ate without any problem began to make me sick. My body just rejected certain foods. I remember one time I ate a slice of pizza and soon after felt terribly unwell. That's when I started paying more attention to what I was putting into my body. Gradually, I changed my diet, eliminating processed foods and opting for healthier, more natural options. And man, what a difference that made. My body started responding positively, and I felt lighter and more energetic. Another noticeable physical change was my weight fluctuation. Without changing anything in my diet or physical activity levels, I started losing and gaining weight unexpectedly. There was a time when I lost about 5 kilos without doing anything different, and then, out of nowhere, I gained it all back. It was a very disconcerting process because I couldn't understand what was happening to my body. But over time, I realized it was part of the alignment and transformation process I was going through. It was like my body was adjusting to this new spiritual phase I was living. And man, one thing that surprised me were the changes in my skin and hair. My skin, which had always been normal, started having breakouts and dryness, but also moments where it seemed to glow unusually. It was like my body was going through a deep detox, and my hair, which had always been healthy, started falling out at times, but then it grew back stronger. It was a very strange process, but at the same time, I began to realize that these physical changes were reflections of the internal transformations I was experiencing. It was like my body was adjusting to a new reality. Finally, one of the most interesting changes was in my posture and flexibility. I had never been a big fan of physical exercise, but during this period, I started practicing yoga and meditation. And man, what a difference that made. My posture improved significantly, and my flexibility increased in ways I never thought possible. It was like my body was aligning with this new spiritual phase I was living, and this not only improved my physical health but also my mental and emotional well-being. It was a complete transformation, and although it was a challenging process, it was incredibly rewarding. Oh, and there's one more thing I can't leave out: the change in my perception of time. During this spiritual awakening process, I started feeling that time was passing differently. Sometimes it felt like an entire day had passed in the blink of an eye, and other times an hour felt like an eternity. It was like time was molding itself to my emotional and energetic state. It was a very strange sensation at first, but then I started realizing that this was part of being more present in the moment. I was living each second more intensely and consciously, and this completely changed my relationship with time. And man, I can't forget to mention the sense of purpose that came with all of this. Before, I was kind of lost, not really knowing what my path was. But during this spiritual awakening process, I started feeling an incredible clarity about what I really wanted to do in life. It was like all the pieces of the puzzle were finally coming together. I started realizing that many of the things I was doing before were not aligned with my true purpose. And this gave me the courage to make significant changes in my life, to follow my heart, and to pursue what really made me happy. And of course, with this new clarity of purpose came a sense of inner peace that I had never experienced before. Even with all the ups and downs, the challenges and the changes, I began to feel a deep tranquility. It was like I was at peace with who I am and the path I was on. And this inner peace reflected in all areas of my life. My relationships improved, my work gained new meaning, and I started living more authentically and fully. It was a profound transformation, and although it was challenging, it was incredibly rewarding. And man, one of the most important things I learned during this process is the importance of self-care. With all these changes and challenges, I realized I needed to take care of myself more consciously. I started dedicating more time to myself, to do things that made me feel good, like meditating, practicing yoga, spending time in nature, and simply relaxing. And this made a huge difference in my life. I started feeling more balanced, more centered, and more at peace with myself. And this reflected in all areas of my life, bringing more harmony and well-being. Another thing that changed was my relationship with spirituality. Before, I had a more skeptical view of these things, but during this process, I started realizing there's much more between heaven and earth than we imagine. I started exploring different spiritual practices like meditation, Reiki, and even some esoteric traditions. And man, this opened a new world for me. I started realizing that spirituality is not something separate from our daily lives, but something that permeates everything we are and do. And this new perspective brought a sense of connection and purpose that I had never experienced before. And speaking of connection, one of the most amazing things that happened was the feeling of being connected to something greater than myself. There were moments during this process where I felt a loving and welcoming presence, like I was being guided and protected. It was a feeling of being at home, of being exactly where I should be, and this brought a sense of peace and security that was very comforting. I started realizing that I was not alone on this journey, that there was a greater force guiding and supporting me every step of the way. And man, one of the most impactful things was the change in my perception of myself. Before, I had a very limited view of who I was, based on labels and external expectations. But during this spiritual awakening process, I started realizing I'm much more than that. I started seeing myself as a complete and integrated being, with a divine essence and a unique purpose. And this completely changed the way I relate to myself and the world around me. I started accepting and loving myself more deeply, and this brought a sense of freedom and empowerment that's hard to describe. And man, one of the most beautiful things about this process was the sense of gratitude that came with all of it. Even with all the challenges and discomforts, I started realizing that all of this was part of a larger process of growth and transformation. And this brought a deep sense of gratitude for each experience, for each lesson learned, for each moment lived. I started seeing life with new eyes, appreciating the little things, valuing every moment. And this brought a joy and lightness that I had never experienced before. So these were some of the unexpected changes that happened to me during my spiritual awakening. It was a journey full of ups and downs, but it brought me many lessons and deep self-knowledge. If you're going through something similar, know that you're not alone, and that all of this is part of the process of personal transformation and growth. And although it may be uncomfortable and challenging, it's also an incredible opportunity to connect with your essence, discover your true purpose, and live a fuller and more authentic life. So guys, these were the 3 unexpected changes in the body during the process of spiritual awakening. Incredible, right? It's fascinating how our physical body responds in such profound and often mysterious ways to this journey of expanding consciousness. But what about you? Have you experienced any of these changes? Or maybe you've gone through something completely different that took you by surprise. It seems that the deeper we go on this path, the more we realize there's much more between heaven and earth than our eyes can see. The transformation is not just internal, it reverberates through every cell of our being, inviting us to explore new levels of self-knowledge and growth. Speaking of growth, could there be a connection between these physical changes and how we deal with our emotions? Have you ever thought that maybe that back pain might be telling you something about an emotional block you haven't noticed yet? Or that the unexplained fatigue might be a sign that you need to slow down and reconnect with your essence? I'm super curious to know what you think about this. Do you believe these changes are signs that we're on the right path? Or are they challenges we need to overcome to reach an even higher level of consciousness? And more, what other changes do you think can happen during spiritual awakening that we haven't discussed here yet? Is there a pattern, or does each person experience it in a totally unique way? If you found this exploration insightful and transformative, consider showing your support by clicking the Super Thanks button below. Your contribution helps us continue bringing you valuable content that delves deep into spirituality and reveals ancient wisdom. For those who have already gone through this, how was your experience? Did you feel fear, curiosity, or perhaps a sense of relief and peace? And for those who are just starting now, what are your expectations? Is there something specific you are trying to understand or achieve? Let's continue this conversation in the comments. Share your stories, your doubts, your discoveries. After all, we are all together on this journey of awakening and self-knowledge. And remember, with every step we take, we unravel a little more of the mystery that is our own existence. So let's keep moving forward, open to the new and ready to embrace every transformation the universe has in store for us.